I guess it wasn't enough that Utah had to beat down USC, but also had to beat up their quarterbacks. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down USC football. We got Scott Wolf on the line from inside USC. Of course, the Trojans coming down off that loss on the road against Utah 41-28. Scott, just a dire situation with the quarterback situation concerning JT Daniels and concussion protocol. Jack Sears gets knocked out, and you possibly have, I should say, Matt Fink gets knocked out, and Jack Sears will probably have to play coming up on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't officially announced anything, but it looks like Jack Sears is going to start because JT Daniels has not passed his concussion test as of right now. They're going to probably try to wait till later today to see if he can pass, because I think they really want him to play if he can at all. But right now, it looks like Jack Sears would make his first college start. And probably more importantly, he was practicing with the scout team the first 7 weeks. So he didn't really even run the offense before this week. So he's got a lot to learn this week.
So if I'm not mistaken, Scott, Jack Sears also hasn't thrown a pass in college, correct?
Yeah, he's never taken a snap in a game.
Never taken a snap in a game. And what's going to happen if he gets hurt, if Matt Fink's not available?
They have a walk-on named Holden Thomas, I guess they would go with. But they're just going to hope he doesn't get hurt. And, if he does play and Daniels is out, you could see a lot of emphasis on the running game, maybe, just to try to keep him healthy. And I'm sure Arizona State's game plan is to blitz a lot and try to put a lot of pressure on the quarterback, because that was really the game plan with Daniels in there for other teams too. So it'll only get worse if Sears is the quarterback.
Well, our conversations with you and a lot of other bloggers and broadcasters and so forth concerning USC football, and what I read online, was that the competition between Fink and Sears before Daniels got in play on campus there in August was pretty marginal, to say the least. That there wasn't a whole lot of hope for either one of those guys emerging as a front runner or being capable of holding down the USC starting quarterback job.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't been overly impressive. I think he did better during the late part of training camp. He also missed a couple weeks during the season where he wasn't practicing because he was hurt. So, I mean, he's kind of been the forgotten quarterback during the season here. So if he starts, he's really going to increase his profile. And, but the thing is, he was a highly touted quarterback in high school, and he got recruited by a lot of schools. So it's not like he's some guy that, they didn't have their eye on for a long time and didn't want, and other schools didn't want. He's got a lot of talent. He just hasn't no experience. So, if JT Daniels hadn't reclassified coming out of high school early, then, he might have been the quarterback at the beginning of the season.
Absolutely. So this is a kid that coming out of high school, according to 247's composite, was the 4th rated pro prospect as a pro quarterback, number 105 in the nation, regardless of position. So he's a top 100 player coming out of high school in the 2017 class out of San Clemente, California. So highly regarded, his talent coming out of high school. So this kid definitely has the tools to get the job done, but is going to bring nothing but inexperience into this game. Scott, few of us saw the Utah game because it was relegated to the Pac-12 network, it being I really don't understand that decision. But anyway, I'm sure the Pac-12 network has a few marquee games that they're able to select throughout the year. But so it was relegated there. Most of us didn't see the game. In reading the recaps, looking at the box score, it looked rather ugly for the Trojans.
The biggest thing, I think, if you didn't see the game, was they got physically dominated by Utah. And that used to be what USC did back in the old days to other teams. And Utah just punished them physically. Their defense completely shut down USC's offense. The score was very misleading. Utah really dominated the game, should have won by a lot more points. USC scored some garbage time touchdowns. USC's defense didn't even play that great. either. They couldn't stop Tyler Huntley, the Utah quarterback. It was just a really bad loss in terms of it could have a carryover effect. And if USC doesn't win Saturday, I've had people tell me inside the program that they think the season's going to go into a real tailspin. So a lot of people think of this as a huge game for them. They still, even with their loss, all their losses can win the Pac-12 South. So it's funny, they still could go the Pac-12 title game, but people think if they don't win this game, then it's going to be a long, long season the rest of the way.
Yeah, when you're USC and you have the expectations of a USC, even in a season in which there appeared to be a transition of power, and with JT Daniels taking over as a true freshman at quarterback, most of us expected a bit of a downfall. But considering the out of conference schedule being as difficult as it is, that they still had a shot because of the talent on the roster to win what's a pretty weak South Division. They lost the key game against Utah. That was the game that I pegged, at least in the preseason, as being the game in this division race. But when you look at it, as you mentioned, they're still 3-2. Utah's 3-2. Sure, they've got the head-to-head, but Utah's a really good team, but not invincible, so they could lose another game, and then USC would have the door wide open. What I find interesting is that Utah now goes to the Rose Bowl to play UCLA tonight, and UCLA suddenly comes out of nowhere with a couple wins, and they're actually a factor in the race. Maybe not legitimately, but just based on mathematics, they're 2-2 right now. So UCLA, if they would win tonight, would own a share of the Pac-12 division lead in the South.
Yeah, I actually think UCLA is in a pretty good spot, believe it or not, because I think they can win tonight against Utah. And if they do that, they're kind of in a good situation. And Utah has a tough schedule, too, the rest of the way. So as good as Utah's playing, they have, some obstacles dealing with tonight, especially, and then going after tonight. So it's not going to be easy because none of these teams are really that good. That's the problem. It's a bunch of bad teams. So that's why anyone can win. And that's why USC's still in the driver's seat. And, more importantly to me, covering USC, and I think I talked about this before the season, winning the Pac-12 South shouldn't be considered a great accomplishment if you're USC with the talent they have. And, I told you back in August, I think the offensive line and the secondary were going to be problems, and they still are huge problems for the team. And then they've had inconsistent quarterback play and some other problems on defense. So it's been a rough 7 games for USC, and that's why I never would have circled the Arizona State game as this critical game to the season, but for their sakes, it is, whether they wanted it to be or not.
Yeah, and even though Arizona State is not going to contend for a division championship, it doesn't appear, they've played rather close against decent opponents like a Washington on the road. They haven't gotten blown out in these games. They only lost to Colorado by 3 points. So they've been in the games and have a pretty decent win against Michigan State earlier in the season. So it should be a pretty close game. We'll end this, Scott, because I know you need to go, on a bit of a positive if you can find anything. So we're looking at a USC team that none of us would be surprised at this point in the season is 4-3 because of the schedule and the way it's set up. But all those 3 games have been decisive losses. They haven't looked good in those games. Is there anything positive you've seen out of this team through 7 games in regards to, hey, this kid's a standout, this kid is a freshman, man, he looks like he's going to live up to his recruiting billing, whatever unit, whatever player, what would be the positive spin on this situation thus far?
As you're asking me that, I'm really thinking because it's so hard. But I would say the wide receivers have been the strongest unit, and Michael Pittman, he's had, I think, a pretty good season. I don't know if you saw, since the game was on the Pac-12 network, which apparently I think actually if you live out of Southern California, you probably have a better chance of getting it. But he made a great catch over 2 guys in the end zone for a touchdown against Utah. And, I think the receivers have actually been pretty good. Their only shortcoming has been could JT Daniels get them the ball on a consistent basis? So That's been the team's strength, but the problem is it gets overshadowed by the defensive line, the secondary, the offensive line, the quarterback, and most importantly to me, coaching. So there's a lot to overcome.
Yeah, so you and everybody else, it seems, even the supporters, the skeleton level of support that Clay Helton had at the beginning of the season, I would think, is deteriorating. So you talk about the schedule and the playing into a situation in which maybe the season comes off the rails. They got to play Notre Dame as well out of conference, so they still have another difficult non-conference game. So it could be an ugly, like 5-7 kind of season. Does Clay Helton possibly lose his job?
That's a $1 million question. I mean, he probably should lose his job. The reason no one knows right now is because everyone has to try to figure out what Lynn Swan thinks and what he really would do. And he's the athletic director, and the the university's in kind of an odd position right now. It has an interim president. It just agreed to a $215 million settlement in part of a class action lawsuit, not the whole lawsuit. So they have some financial issues they're dealing with. So there's questions whether he has the authority to fire Helton financially, if that would be a burden, and then whether or not because so far Lynn Swan hasn't taken accountability for anything, and he actually gave Helton a contract extension after last season. So if he fires him now, that's just kind of showing he's made a mistake, and I don't know if he wants to admit he made a mistake. So I would suspect if he comes back, they would ask him to make some coaching changes on his staff at least. But everyone's kind of monitoring it to see what's going to happen because nobody really knows for sure what Lynn Swan would do.
Yeah, that seems to be a problem with a lot of people in life is that it's difficult to admit a mistake. I've got one bright spot for you, Scott, before we let you go. We
Okay.
did get a new badge of helmets, and we put
I saw that.
in center there for you. So that just came in yesterday.
It's reminding me of that the USC Alabama game a couple of years ago. That was a big blowout.
Yeah, I didn't do that intentionally for you.
That's okay. At least they're on the top row. That's all that matters.
We put them on the top row for you, Scott. They may have to take a tumble after this particular segment until they win a few more games. We got Scott Wolf on the line from inside USC. You got to join him right there for USC football coverage. Scott does a great job for us, keeping us in line with the Trojans. And despite the record, obviously very relevant and one of the name brands in college football. Scott, you're welcome anytime. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I hope we can talk next week, Mark.
Absolutely. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
That is